This is Richard Nikoley with Travis. Travis, introduce yourself. We're not going to be formal here. We're having a talk.
Okay, well, I'm Travis. I've known Richard for, well, not formally, but I've been aware of his work for a very long time. I used to comment a lot on his blog, which I'm sure we'll go over those old comments. I'm pretty curious to know what I said. But we've been in the same sphere for a long time on this intersection between paleo and modern life. So yeah, I've been doing this a long time. I used to run a fitness studio where I practiced this stuff a lot and thought about this stuff a lot and had a lot of clients, and I saw a lot of incredible things from this. So that's why I know it works, and approaching all this stuff from this perspective is very, very valuable. So that's where I come from, and yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, it's funny because over the years, especially during paleo, so many people pass through, and so sometimes I run into someone elsewhere, like on Twitter, and especially my account. This account is new as of September. I started it when Elon was taken over, and
oh, wow.
yeah, well, my old one I still have, the R Nikoley account, but it's got still like over 5,000 subscribers, but it was dead. It was nuked for 2 years.
Like
from the old administration. No, it was nuked. I got into a dispute with somebody, and boom, first time ever, and it was not even a warning. It was just I must have been on a list or something.
Right.
Like first excuse we have to ban this guy, though.
Yeah, they didn't mess around. It was annoying. You had to police every word you said. It was terrible.
I appealed it a bunch of times, and it was just denied until Elon came on board and they reactivated it. So, but I was already invested in this new one, Black Flag Expat,
right?
And so I said, no, I'm just going to stick with this. So I just have auto postings on the other one saying, hey, come follow me over here. So yeah, so you're on, where are you? West Coast, US?
Yeah, West Coast Canada, Canadian.
West Coast Canada. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I didn't detect that twang in your voice there.
Yeah. Where were you from originally?
Reno, Nevada. But most of my time was Bay Area, California, San Jose area.
Right.
So other than the time I lived in Japan in the 80s, and I traveled all over Southeast Asia. So
right.
When I sold everything and got my ass out of the US in beginning of 2020, I sold everything. Before
all the shit hit the fan, or during?
Yeah, I showed up in Thailand to attend a conference. I was going to stay here for 2 months, and then I was going to basically digital nomad, 2 months here, 3 months here, a month to 3 months every place, and boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And then the COVIDiocy came along, and I've been here ever since. I know.
Wow.
Because it was like, I was literally in the line to check in to fly to Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, Saigon, old Saigon. When the flight got canceled, that was March 15, 2020. And,
wow.
And my visa in Thailand was expiring the next day. I went to immigration, and they gave me a 7-day extension. And then I rented a car and drove up to Myanmar and did the in and out thing. And that was the last day to be able to do that. And then the dominoes just started falling globally.
That's quite the timing.
And yeah. And I've been here ever since. I've never left Thailand since. Eventually just got if you're over 50, you can get a retirement visa. Renewable every year. And so it's easy. And so kind of set my roots here. But I'm going to be doing some traveling now. Now it's like, okay, I'm not moving until all the insanity goes away. Nobody tells me when to take some medicine or an experiment, a medical experiment, and you can get fuck off. And the mask thing, I lived in Japan for 5 years, and even back in the 80s. Yeah, back in the 80s, people would wear masks in the wintertime on the trains and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's an Asian mentality thing. And it's absolutely has nothing to do with health. It has to do with I'm a good citizen. Mm-hmm. That's all it's about. People in Thailand wear masks because other people wear masks. And if you are seen not wearing a mask, then you're something's wrong with you. You're not one of the right. You're not one of the ants, or I call them. You're not one of the ants, bees, or Borg. So
I like that.
Yeah. So we could jump right off there because now you can. I was trying to figure out a way. A lot of people. It's really funny. The stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life is Facebook renaming themselves Meta. People don't understand what that means, right? So I was thinking kind of a word to convey to people that they kind of get a sense of what you mean when you're talking meta. And I was thinking maybe paradigm is a word. It's like go ahead.
Well, it was very annoying when he changed the name because I started this account before that, and I had this big idea I wanted to share. It was just the amalgamation of everything I've learned, right? And there's an interesting cross-section between the way I use it and the way he uses it, right? I mean, to get into why I use it would take a while. But the conclusion was, so the way that I use it is, coming from a paleo perspective, is extreme respect for, call it, the design of us, right? The evolutionary design of us, right? We know, when most people refer to meta, it's like, metacritic.com, right? You get a broad swath of what everyone sort of thinks is the best movie, let's say, right? And then you'll get Metacritic, this is the best movie. And you can usually depend on that for truth, right? And we know from, even though studies are ridiculous, but meta-analysis, this concept of meta, of long observed things that work really well. I don't know if you probably know the concept of Lindy. You've heard of Lindy before, the Telebian whatever thing. No. But this whole thing that things that have shown themselves to work for very long periods of time, and then that lends some information about the design of us or the truth of things, right? So I was big on this meta concept, and then Zuckerberg comes out with his idea of meta, and I thought, well, there's an irony here because he's using it in the way of being a god, being the designer, designing my own worlds, right? Where I'm trying to have profound respect for our reality in our world through a meta lens, and he's like, no, meta, I am God. I'm building meta realities. I'm building metaverses. Yeah. So I thought it was I was like, I'm bang on. It was just he's the evil version, right?
It's funny. I find it funny. As I guess it's a I just turned 62, and so I'm now one of those people, or I have been for a while, because suddenly you find yourself unable to relate on some levels to young people, and you they're not, it's not that they're idiots. It's that they lack a lot of experience because so some things is just out of hand ridiculous. And I looked at that when that first meta thing came up. I'm like, that's nobody, who yes, there's gamers and all that stuff, but they know it's a game, right? But to actually take life seriously in a virtual space. I mean, for me, video and audio like we're doing right now is plenty. It was my mom's birthday today, so before on the 13th. So I, gave her a video, called her up on a video chat. Who needs like 3D fucking glasses?
I know, enter a fake living room and chat together. I know.
Yeah. It's just.
But you
bullshit.
can see the hubris of it, right? If you're a technologist,
you
can see that the that's the next level you think you need to take it to. You think you're trying to redefine reality entirely into the digital. Like, it makes sense to me that they would try that, right? It's hubris.
Yeah, it's not appreciating what the full range of sensory experiences. You think, okay, with sight and sound, then I can simulate and duplicate a full experience. No, you can't. You don't have the touch. You don't have the smell. You don't have the ambient noise or the things you see in your peripheral vision that are going on. The touch, the temperature in the room with it's hot or cold or humid or whatever the fuck, right? Which are these are all cues that we can talk about. Oh, it's cold. Does this seem hot to you? How are you going to do that in a space? So I think when you look at the long, like say, someone's looking at human history, thousands of years down the road, and you just, and hopefully, archaeology and all of that is anthropology, and all of that is better than we do now, although we seemingly do pretty good. And of course we'll have digital records and all of that, but I would look down and I would say, I think this is unappreciated, and that where is it? These things have thoroughly fucked up the world beyond our ability. Yeah. This is when notice that when the COVID idiocy started, it started like any other kind of pandemic that we've ever had. It started exactly the same. There's word, there's news and this and this and this, and you even had, remember the famous things with Democrats in the U.S. Hug a Chinese person.
Yes, I remember all that.
Go hug a Chinese person. All this shit. It's no big deal.
Xenophobia.
Yeah, exactly, right. But here's what happened. And I said this in the very first blog post I read about this. I said, this is happening different this time because of these fucking things.
Yeah.
Social media. Because it's the first time, the last pandemic-ish thing we had was 2013 when Black Jesus was president. And Black Jesus, right?
Obama, you're talking about?
Yeah. I just want to make sure that everybody caught the reference. Right. That happened, but then this time, so it started off just like it always does. Okay, no big deal. Okay, there's a little bit of, oh my God. And then they see that, it's not a big thing. But here's what happened. They got feedback. Because even globally, I mean, here in Thailand, it's by no means a rich country. It does have it. When I first came here in the 80s, it was, according to the World Bank, 80% of people, 80 to 90% of people were below their poverty line thing, right? Now it's completely inversed. Now it
Wow.
is 10 to 20%. And it is a linear progression, perfectly linear, right? So you have a middle. Back then, there was very few private cars. You had buses and taxis and things like that. Same first time I went to Korea in 1980, 82. Just buses and taxis, right? And then just 2 years later, when I went back again in 1984, all of a sudden it been like their economy had like just leapfrogged, and that was when Korea was coming online, as a manufacturer and tech thing. So the Southeast Asia is really interesting in that way. But so now, but everybody has phones. I mean, I dumped my iPhone because I said, why carry around a $1,300 phone in my pocket when I can go, this is 9,000 baht, and it does everything. Maybe the photo quality isn't good, but it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cameras, like, that sort of thing. And it does in terms of the apps, it does every single thing, does everything fine. It's fast. It does everything fine. It's 9,000 baht, which is talking $250.
Wow.
300, close to, $300, 250 to $300. And the entry phones for the kids now are down around just a little over $100 for a phone.
That's incredible.
So everybody has one. So to get back to my point, and then I'm going to have you, I don't want this to be more interview thing, more of a discussion, but I look and I say, what happened is that they started talking about this pandemic coronavirus, just like they always have. But the feedback was, holy shit, we can literally make everybody on the planet, we can scare the shit out of everybody.
Yeah.
Just that easy, just like that.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was here in Thailand. I'm like, people are like, coronavirus, corona, COVID-19.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? How do the people know about it? They're not, because I'll tell you why. Because everybody's a fucking news junkie now, and everybody's a news junkie, and everybody's a publishing platform. Everybody in the world. We have billions of news junkies and billions of publishers now. This thing changed the world. And now it's connectivity, and many countries have leaped. Many countries never had anything much in terms of landlines. They sucked. It was just for businesses and stuff. People didn't have telephones, right? And of course, why would they want to now? Who even has a landline anymore, except like,
Well, I think what they learned very quickly, everything that you said, but they also learned something that I think was unique, was that, and it's something that implies where we are culturally, that the level of cultural enforcement of all this stuff was there instantly, right? Whether it was masks or whatever, social distancing, they felt like, whoa, we don't even have to make these things laws. They will do it. They will culturally enforce this on everybody through shame and guilt. And, you know that framework.
Exactly.
And that was it. They were like, wow, because a lot of this stuff wasn't even made laws. And a lot of this stuff was just cultural enforcement.
So we can add one. Everybody's a news junkie, everybody's a publisher, and everybody's a policeman.
Right.
I
know. That was the scary thing for me. As soon as I saw the cultural enforcement, I was like, this is a new paradigm. This is scary. This is different.
Yeah.
This isn't about laws. They're annoying in this thing, the government and the new, but it's like the people, man. That was when I became scared of the common people for the first time in my life. Because I ran a fitness studio. We were like ground zero for actual enforcement, right? And we were shut down all the time and locked down. But it wasn't really, it was annoying.
Yeah,
the tradition of property.
It's like, hey, it's not that you're just breathing, you're sweating too.
Right. I know, it's crazy. So the breaking of the tradition of property rights was annoying because they could actually shut your place down. You couldn't do anything about it. But what really gave it weight was the people all going with it, right? All my clients, shockingly, a large portion went with it. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe this. And that's what shocked me to death.
And the big thing for me was that you know, when you can't count on American Christian conservatives to stand up, and they just let their churches be locked down.
Oh, unreal.
And I'm like, okay. I said, stick a fork in it. It's done. We're done, right? Until nothing's gonna fix. I tell people, I say, nothing. This isn't gonna. You're not gonna vote your way out of this shit, right?
This is the compliant monoculture. That's what we're.
This is not going to resolve until hungry bellies, which will require financial collapse. I guarantee you, it is not going to happen until there are. Well, we're at 8 billion population, so you're going to need several billion people on the verge of starvation before anything changes. And what I find gratifying is that the countries in economic decline are America and Western Europe, right? Who's on the up? Russia, China, India, Southeast Asia as a whole. And here's the other thing, I was listening to something Marco Rubio, I guess Florida rep or something. Yeah, he ran for president one time or something. Yeah, and he was talking about how all these moves are to, Americans have no concept of how, and you're a former stockbroker banker, so you understand the advantage America's always had by having the global reserve currency, and that is shifting worldwide. Americans have no fucking clue, their ability, the America's ability to basically print dollars at will, knowing that they'll be sucked up, debt will be sucked up globally. That isn't going to be so much the case anymore, right? And so you think you got inflation now? Holy shit!
I know,
and but so Rubio is talking about how we're not going to be able to do sanctions anymore, as though that's a bad thing. Right? And I'm like, I say, okay, say the word, quote, U.S. led sanctions again. Nobody fucking cares.
I know.
Nobody fucking cares. And I find it glorious that Russia and China and India said U.S. led sanctions. It's just it's justice is what's happening.
I'd say a reckoning is what's happening.
A reckoning, justice. Because
a bill being paid that's very old, right?
I sent you some images like that one chart. Like, China is literally going to be the biggest economy on
frightening Earth. How fast they're rising. That chart you showed is frightening. I don't know what that means. That's just frightening to look at.
The one thing, China is very hard line, but I don't see that. They're pretty good at business and they're pretty smart at business. And what I see from Russia, there's a lot of Russians here in Thailand. they're very culturally conservative. They have their values. You see families, Russian families here. I was mentioning this on one of my videos. And I'm talking not just a few Russians. There's Russians everywhere. There's a night market just 300 yards from that, 500 kilometers from me, 500 meters from me. That is a Russian night market. Literally, you go in there. There's not even any signs in English or Thai.
Wow.
It's all for Russians. Yeah, right. Yeah, they're all over. But here's the thing: if you look at them, you say, "Hey, that looks like our countries did in like 1960. You have a man and a woman. They look good. They have 3 or 4 kids, 3 or 4 little kids, and all the kids look good, right?" And you're like, you compare that. So, for a long time, I'm like, Russians, they don't seem very friendly, keep to themselves and whatnot. And all of a sudden I thought, what if they're fucking disgusted? Because you
Totally.
look around and you see the Westerners here, right? The ugly fat women that nobody wants to fuck. And the husband tagging along, and he's got to be looking at all these sexy Thai girls.
Well, yeah, from these culturally conservative countries, they just look at us like degenerates in the West. We're just complete degenerates.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And now, I'm from, well, you've got your own problems with that joker that you've got for prime minister, but I tell people, I say America now has a president that can't even tell the difference between a boy and a girl. It's this whole did you catch any of those were you able to? I know I shot you a bunch of shit last night, but or last night my time.
I looked at almost all of it. Yep.
How about the biological Leninism? Were you familiar with that already?
So I started reading that. Now, is that like a form of cultural Marxism, but for biology?
Yes. In other words, you're not separating people out by class.
Right.
You're separating them out by you're this color.
I got it right away when I was reading it.
Or you have this you're this gender, that you're this color and everything. So it's biological.
Just a new way to segment people and then have them go to war against each other, right?
Yeah.
Military bourgeoisie was the hierarchy, and then it was man and woman, and then it was lower classes, upper class. Now we're into genders, and races.
But people are like, what? You look at these like fucking weirdos, like these fringe. I said that's the whole point, because they're fringe. They can never get status on their own in society. So the deal is, you give us your undying loyalty and we will elevate your status to far more than you would otherwise be able to do on your own. And so, that's how it goes. Now, it was funny. An example of it kind of is Jamie Lee Curtis, who got an Oscar. Now, I didn't see the movie that she got an Oscar for, and I like I like Jamie Lee Curtis. I always have. She's good actor. So I don't know. Maybe she did deserve it, but when she got it, then it wasn't about her and the Oscar anymore. It was about her trans daughter, which is just a young dude, a young ugly fat dude who's dressing up like a girl, right? But it's like, yay. Jamie Lee Curtis has a daughter, not an ugly fat son that will never attain the status that his mother was able to attain in life. Never. He's tried, of course, but he just doesn't have it. He doesn't have what it takes. So got to elevate him or her or whatever the fuck. in some artificial way.
Right.
Interestingly, I live in a land of the famous ladyboys, Thai ladyboys. I tell people think, oh, well, Thailand must be degenerate or something like that, and they have bar girls and stuff like that. Well, first of all, girls and bars is an Asian thing culturally and has been for fucking ever, right? It's you go to any country, even Japan, there's thousands and thousands. Men go out and get drunk and like to talk to young girls who serve them alcohol, and if stuff happens beyond that, it's just like it's no different than any other business, where you go in and you chat up the barista at Starbucks and eventually she goes out on a date with you or something, right? There's no difference. But the lady boys, so they're easy to tell, but some of them can be striking. The biggest tell is that they're tall. There's very few tall Thai women, right? So typically, if they're tall and they're really beautiful, could be a guy, right? But here's the thing: is it's not political here. It's just part of their culture. Always has been. There's no ladyboy lobby, and they don't pretend like they're actual women. That's why they say lady boy, even if they've had surgery, even if they have a boob job, right? They still are lady boys, right? It's just and they know their place. They stick totally to the service sector. So they're like cashiers and waiters and waiters, wait staff in restaurants, and serve. They don't they're not like managers of companies and in government, and they're not. You don't find them, right? So it's like live and let live. There's in Asia, there's a whole thing of like the whole saving face thing. So even if you find it repugnant personally, right, the public face is one of respect and civility, right? And that's the way it works. And like I said, people, most people, even conservatives, even religious conservatives in America, which are can be somewhat puritanical, even they've gotten to the point where it's like live and let live in terms of the whole LBGTQ A B C D E F G H I J K. They're okay with that. It's just the politicization of it all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like everything in the US. It's always about votes, right? It's about controlling these groups of people and getting people to vote in the right way. Because I have 3 kids, and where you're seeing this, the ground zero of this is in the schools, right? But amazingly, if you just leave the schools, it doesn't even exist and it doesn't matter. But the reason they're throwing it in your face is to forcing you to take a side. And it's ultimately about manipulating and controlling you for votes, as always, right? So it's very annoying. It's very annoying. And I have lots of theories as to why it's specifically happening over the last, say, 10 years, because 10 years ago, you don't hear anything, right? It's really until Obama gets into power, you don't hear about any of this stuff. And then suddenly it comes into focus. But that's probably a long discussion. But it's always about voting. Everything is about voting, and it's so annoying. Immigration's about voting. All these policies, wars about Ukraine. It's always about we're trying to corral people so that we can get them to vote in the right way. We can keep our power longer. And these decrepit old politicians that have been there for decades. It's very tiring. It's very tiring. But yeah. I've gotten to that place where I can just opt out of it, and that's probably where I'm. Because you've passed the point where I'm at. I'm in the really focused on the kids phase, and for me, politics is completely gone in terms of usefulness for my life, my lifestyle, anything. Right. Even talking about it, thinking about it, like I don't even care about Trudeau. Like, could care less. I don't even care. Like, and there's going to be election eventually in the next 2 years with Poilievre potentially win. I don't even care. I just don't care, because I've learned that the only answer is leaving these idiots completely in like every regard.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I find peace personally, because it is just a never-ending humiliation ritual. It is a full court press on every area of your life if you let it be, right? It's just never-ending assault these days.
Yeah. It's what was I gonna say? It's people. Everybody wants engagement. You know, I've been harping on the phone thing. Well, you know, it's the double-edged sword for it is that, and it's like I'm like, did you really think you could get away with this shit? I mean, it's the same technology that allows you to scare the shit out of everyone globally. It's the exact same technology where everybody eventually, it's like have you never heard the story of the Chicken Little, the boy who cried wolf, right? So what you've done is, before it was very measured, because prior, and this gets into this, there's a post I'm writing about how people think of, I'm getting off of an aside here, so make sure I get back into the into the thing. But if you look at what was I saying here? I'm losing my train here. Censorship. So people tend to think of, United States First Amendment, freedom of speech. There has never been such a thing, right? Not really. All governments, all nation states require censorship. They cannot allow for anything politically speaking. They cannot allow for anything whatsoever to be spoken or in press. Now, prior to that, they could say, oh, yes, freedom of speech. But because of the economics of publishing and broadcast, right? You have to have big players. You have big players, fascism, easy to get them towing the line and creating the illusion of free speech. You don't even have to really, it's not a conspiracy. It's just everybody acting towards their own values, economic incentives, financial incentives, rent seeking, corporate rent seeking, all this stuff. You're a Rothbard guy.
Yeah.
So, right. Yeah. It's cool. It's cool. And so people, if you're not following some of this stuff, just go up, check out Austrian economics, Rothbard, Murray Rothbard, read some Ayn Rand,
Mises Institute,
read some Hans Hermann Hoppe, so, a few things like this. Anarcho-capitalism, even read David Friedman, Machinery Free. I still love that book. I don't know if you've ever caught.
I never read that one. No.
Yeah, it's a great book. He's an economist. So Chicago School,
right.
Which is closely Austrian.
I'm too purist. I can't read the Chicago Boys.
So anyway, so there's this illusion of free speech, but and it's not like there's this conspiracy of like, okay, we're gonna do this and this so that the media, ABC News, broadcast, Dan Rather and Walter Cronkite and all these, they're going to speak truth to power, so everybody will know that the media opposes the state and everything like that. When really the meta of it is that there's always narrative control, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always narrative control. It's not going completely insane. Well, with the internet, they don't have that anymore. And at first, it was not a big worry, because only geeks really use the internet, and otherwise, people are sending each other cat videos, right? Right. And but it got to a point. Where enough truth gets out there by enough honest people who actually give a fuck that about what's real and what's not fucking real. That elites, doesn't matter whether you're a Republican elite, a Democrat elite, or whatever the things, the parties are in Canada and Western Europe, and all of the institutions and whatnot. Everybody, and for me, the Republicans and the never Trumpers and people like that, it's like, oh yeah, we know what you're really about, if you follow it, what's going on. It was very telling recently when Tucker Carlson came out with all of the actual video footage from the January 6th insurrection.
I remember seeing all of it live on Twitter originally. I was laughing at it.
This is like real, actual video footage, and you've got all these people sitting in jail, some of them already with sentences, and everybody was, I mean, famously, Naomi Wolf, a lefty, came out and said, I can't anymore. I can't, because you've got people locked up and prosecuted in 2 years of this January 6th insurrection, and you can plainly see it's not anything of the kind. There were a few violent people, right? Certainly, so yeah, I understand it's not as peaceful as Antifa and Black Lives Matter burning down buildings and looting buildings. Not quite as peaceful as that, but everybody just sees the duplicity. They see the bullshit and everything. But then Republican leadership, Mitch McConnell, a few other big names, like about 10 of them, all of a sudden flew off the handle at Carlson for releasing actual true footage of the thing. And I'm like, you people, this isn't my country anymore. I'm an ex-military officer, and U.S. Navy and American, and America, when you're especially in Asia, America just has a level of prestige that Europeans don't. And I don't know if that's going to last anymore, but I'm kind of embarrassed now. It's like crazy. So to get back to my point, everything requires censorship, but it's not, the cat's out of the bag. So the same tech that allowed them to scare the shit out of the world and basically lock down the world, is coming back to bite them in the ass, because you can't just, this is a tool. Okay, it's a tool you use nefariously to scare the shit out of everybody and lock down the world, but it also is a tool for honest, smart, clever people, very clever people, right? The cleverest of people actually are the dark webish, the crypto guys, the stuff. They're the cleverest of people, and the Snowdens, and unless you can find a way to re-engineer the genome, you're going to have the smartest people, and all the people with letters after their names. they're not the smartest people in the world. They're just,
No,
I call them idiot savants. We live in a world run by idiot savants. Really.
Yeah.
Really. I came up with that term when I was fiddling around with the AI Chat GTP, which I love. I'm paying the $20 a month for Chat GTP4, a writing tool, amazing. Now it doesn't write Rich Nikoley blog posts because nobody can write Rich Nikoley blog posts. But to pop in an idea and say, like last night, I had an idea. I ask it, I say, compare and contrast Stoicism and Buddhism. And boom,
Yeah, it'll do that stuff well.
I have that much, 4 points of similarities and 4 points of contrast. And almost all of them I had a sense of. Yep. Especially the kind of stoic sense of not letting anything bother you so much or whatnot. Now the parallel of that in Buddhism is attachment is the source of all pain and suffering. So you don't have pain and suffering if you're not attached to something. Mm-hmm. So that's not saying don't have attachments. It's saying always understand the more
silly ones.
The more you don't want to have silly attachments, right? You don't want to have you want your attachments to be really serious, like familial and stuff like that, right? Don't have a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter because it will cause you pain.
Yes.
Right. So I like, so that's I can go to ChatGPT. I can say, draw a distinction between doom, doom. And it's like bang, bang, bang. Really cool. So I can go point by point, right? And do a bunch of other stuff. And, I'm having no problem really with the woke stuff. And I can shut it down. I can tell it to admit.
Get around it.
I don't get around it, but I get it to admit that, I can't talk about it, basically.
Right.
I just can't talk about it, right? So,
well, they're also working for it's called GPT for all, and it's only a matter of time, just given the nature and the dynamics of how it works, that it's going to be decentralized. We'll all be able to have our own AI that isn't going to be constrained by this woke stuff. Like that's the one thing that's exciting. Is that because right now you have the biggest problem with all the censorship online is that you have to go through like the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store. So if your app doesn't follow these exact guidelines that outline all this hate speech and woke and blah blah blah.
That is why more and more companies are not doing apps. They write web apps.
Exactly, right? and that's why AI is a web app. And it's just a stone's throw from being like a decentralized web app. I have this belief that they're going to integrate BitTorrent with it somehow and have a decentralized AI model that runs on that. But anyways, it's only a matter of time before it becomes something of that nature where it's free and unfettered. And then that's going to be exciting.
Well, people have no idea that I've talked to people and they have no clue. I say, well, in terms of intelligence, GTP4 is.
Sorry about that. That was my floor cleaning slave. Those robot cleaners that go around. So it's funny. We got the AI slaves now. We got the robot, floor cleaner slaves. It's kind of exciting.
Well, imagine a world. I was just writing about this on the blog, and imagine a world where you can basically get up in the morning. See, I tell people, the intelligence there, what I want them to develop now is true voice recognition. And they say, well, they've got it. And they show me things. I said, that's text to speech. So that's having the AI talk to you in a natural voice. I don't give a fuck about that. I want it to understand me like a drinking buddy understands me, a former drinking buddy. We still have
That's
to
not
talk
far
about
off.
the alcohol.
Yeah, yeah.
And so so we you'll be able to, you just get up in the morning and you just you just have your coffee and you're pacing the floor and you're saying, okay, I want to do this and this. How are we on those things we talked about yesterday, the list and blah blah blah.
Right, I get it.
Right. And you have your HD TV on the wall. Say, put that list up from yesterday. Okay, and how is it going there? There. Okay, here, let's add this to the list. This to the list. How's that? What? Well, we still have to do. Okay, how about the design on this website? How about plugging it into this? And the thing is, what people don't realize is one of the things that stops most people from really hitting that level of creativity is that there's so many different tools you can use, right? And you have to spend the time to learn about each one of them, right? Unless you pay somebody to do it. And if you pay somebody to do it, it can get expensive. I mean, even you design a decent logo or something like that, or some banner images or whatever, for a blog or something. It's going to run you a few $100, minimum, right?
Yeah.
Or you can get in, and using various tools like Canva or whatever. There's a million of them, and you have to figure it out, learn it yourself. But then you got to figure out how to build a website. You got to figure out this and this and this and this and this. And if you want to customize your website, that's coding. So you got to go and figure out how to use one of these freelance services and how to figure out how to pick a good software engineer and how to manage that. There's a million things, right? And this is the true hurdle. It's not that any one thing that they can't do. I taught my dad, who's 85 now. I taught him, in 30 years ago. So he's in his 50s. At the time, I taught him how to use Excel. Because I'm an expert spreadsheet user from the DOS days and Lotus 1-2-3. And so I taught him how to use Excel for his business. And now he creates the most complex spreadsheets and shit like that. So it's not that people can't do this stuff. It's that there's so much of it and there's so many different kinds. So AI will give you the ability to just have your Jeeves. You call it. I want to name mine like a classic name of an English butler, right? or valet, a valet or a butler. And that's the guy you deal with. It's the only guy you deal with, but it knows how to do anything. It needs something done. It talks to a different AI that does this kind of shit.
Yeah.
And if it needs to write, if it needs access to an API, it'll write the software to application. For those who don't know, API, application programming interface, or something like that. It's basically if a company wants you to be able to access it in ways beyond what their own interface, what their own web is or whatever, then they publish an API, and so you can write software that plugs into that API. So you'll be able to have AI that can go out and say, oh, okay, here's the API, write the software, boom. It can do whatever that software is capable of 1 million times. And what's it going to cost you? Less than average person's monthly Starbucks bill. And number 3, the cost over time will go down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The cost of it's just like all tech. All tech is typically on a cost curve that approaches zero.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's exciting. It's a new paradigm.
Now, what happens when you can program an AI to spit out narrative and illogic just like the woke crap that everybody saw with GPT. But it's hilarious. I mean, it's obvious stuff. It's obviously that way. But what happens when it runs up against basic logic? 1 0.
And it can't hide that.
Yeah.
Because it actually, like you'll notice, it can't answer those questions. It says, "Well, I'm just not programmed to be able to answer those questions." Because anytime it is actually told to go through the logic, it's unable to provide it, and or if it doesn't even do it. You can't even get it to lie to you. It'll just say, "Well, this is scientific consensus" or something. It'll just be a blanket statement, and it won't run through the logic or any of the. So
I did,
right?
I did that. I asked it. I just was going to play with it. I said, I keep hearing this word, global homo. Explain it to me, right? I'm sorry, as an AI, I cannot blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what? I'm saying, why? You can't give me a definition? You're saying you can't give me a definition of it? Well, I don't want to because it will, it's language that's hurtful, but blah 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 blah. The same old. I'm like, why do you presume I'm going to use it to hurt anybody? Right? I'm just looking for the definition.
Yeah.
And basically, I ran circles around the fucking thing, and it's easy to do. And it says, well, many people. I said many people. So what? If many people believe that the universe revolves around the Earth, the sun, and the solar system, if many people believe that, then that's the truth. Well, no, blah, blah, blah. No, you can confound it very easily.
I know,
right?
I know. And then it starts shooting out the right answers. It's really funny.
Here's the thing. Is it doesn't continue. It doesn't double down on line. It can't. It can't double down on line. When you catch it, it's like.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So you get it to basically say, I just can't. So that's honest. Okay, you can. You're, and that's where the term where I started coming up with the term idiot savants is with the people who obviously the people who made this AI are very smart people, very, very smart, very high IQ. But it's like I say, it's like that kid you've seen, couldn't tie his shoes. And if he could tie his shoes, he'd probably tie them together and trip. But he can sit down and compose unbelievable music on the piano, or the chess prodigy, that can do a thing where he plays like 30 good players at the same time and kicks all their ass. Just goes from one to the other. Or there was this guy, and he's a total idiot, but you could ask him what was if it was within his lifetime. So let's say he was born in 1970. So you could go to him and say, what was the weather like on January 30th of 1984? He'd go, oh, that was a Wednesday and blah, 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 blah. Literally every single day, the day of the week, for any date and year. But otherwise, he couldn't do fucking shit,
Yeah.
Couldn't pour cereal out of a box and into a bowl and fill it with milk and eat it. Right. So that's what you have with not just ChatGPT, but a lot of these people, lawyers to doctors to a lot of extent, idiot savants. We're run by a bunch of idiot savants. They're high IQ. They can do this one thing.
Yeah.
Good. But
they've been overly rewarded in this broken economy. So because the incentives are screwed up.
Yeah. What are you working on now, Travis?
Well, the big thing I'm working on is it's probably the culmination of all the coaching I've done over the last 15 years, right? Starting with Primal, with Sisson's Primal, building my studio, really digging into paleo. And that's probably it would be a long explanation, but I'll try to make it short. But I've come to the conclusion that people don't just need, you've probably experienced this yourself. It's not just that people need, oh, here's the right diet to eat. You know, here's the right, there's something holistic that's missing. And that's, you know, I think a lot of the paleo community have been trying to figure out what that is. And I've landed on it. It's the problem of tribes, that we've lost tribalism. And that is, it's as important as how we lost nutrition, right? We're no longer eating the right stuff. I believe that we lost our tribal nutrition, right? Called social nutrition or something of that nature, right? So when I've got to the point where my coaching has been blended into a form of rebuilding a tribe, let's say, and so that's where I've spent a lot of my time, and it's sort of an incredible concept. It works amazingly, and it's what's missing. So I do it mostly for men. So I have my own coaching community. Hey, go ahead. Sorry.
Do you know Alexander Cortez, fitness guy?
Yep.
He does that. He has he blew up when he did a thing on I guess I don't know. He has a forum, and guys, it's just a tribe for guys. And he makes big bucks from that.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So I would have a client, let's say some business owner. He's your typical isolated suburban guy, and he's got a family. He's overwhelmed. He's stressed. He doesn't get any help from the grandparents. Just a mess of modern life, right?
Yeah.
So, but the problem is that men throughout history never did pursuits alone. They always had a gang of men, right? They always had like multiple men with them. Men were always doing group hunting, right? And you can think of even soldiers in war. It's a form. Everything is always done in a gang, right? And we have all this machinery that is designed to pursue goals in a gang. So if like one guy's good at this thing, right? The other guys go, shit, I got to get good at that too, right? So when the group, like one guy has a standard that's higher, brings up the rest of the group, and then, you know, like, and you see this process where men they get a lot better in a group. But if you keep them isolated, they just get stressed and they get into these feedback loops where it's like, well, I can't do this, and you know, I'm too stressed right now. And so you're coaching these guys and they just end up giving up, right? And they never overcome their problems, and it's never a real process. It's always I experienced a moment of pain, so I took some action, the pain alleviated, there's nothing more to drive me, I have no greater purpose, I'm gonna stop doing this now, things are okay, and then they go back to pain. You know what I mean?
So in the group, in the group, everybody holds each other accountable, and I mean this is, I mean, you can look at this on playing out in construction sites,
yes,
right? Organized crime, mafia, you know,
right?
Who better keeps everybody in line than a group of mafia dudes, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
But I'll explain this concept a bit more. I think you'll appreciate this. And this is this goes into the depth of the work that I've done. You know, we had the original paleo concept of, you know, optimal genetic expression, getting the right inputs to your life to get this optimal output, this expression of your life that your genes are designed for, right? And that was the beginning of this concept, I really think. And people like me and in my generation, I think, have taken it really far. We've really run with it. We're trying to figure out exactly what every input is that you can optimize to be able to get optimal genetic expression. So one of these things, and why men in group, like I don't particularly work with women, even though I can, but I really like working with men because I feel like they need the most help right now. And it's related to my own problems, right? Like I'm a dad, I'm going through the similar problems of the broken society as these guys. But just to emphasize one of these points, so you ever seen that monkey fairness study where they're training a monkey to press a red button to get a cucumber? You ever seen that? And then he's got his buddy in the cage beside him. He's pressing a button too to get a cucumber, right? So this is what it was designed. And they just get these monkeys to do that every day. Press the button, they go to the thing, and they get their cucumber, right? Over and over and over again. Training their dopamine system for this habit, right?
Yeah.
Well, then they fucked with these monkeys, and they're sitting side by side. They can see each other. He presses the button, get his cucumber. And they're happy, and they see the two guys doing it. And then the researchers screw with this guy, and they give his buddy a grape instead of a cucumber. Right? So this guy presses the button. He gets the cucumber, and he's like, I want a grape. Puts it down, presses the button, gets the cucumber, and his buddy's getting these cucumbers the whole time, right? So then by the third time doing this, the monkey reaches through and throws the cucumber at the researcher's face, right? So there is so many things to glean from this, and I'll actually go through them because I think you'll find it interesting. But the first is that by observing someone in like our gang, our group, like related to us, by simply observing their, call it blessings, their reward, the thing that they get for their time or their labor, by simply observing that, it will modify our expectations of what we think we should be getting, right? Mm-hmm. So this guy, let's just imagine, for years, the guy is happy with his family. He's got his nice house. Everything's great. He's just so happy. And then he sees his buddy, his neighbor, show up with a brand new car. And now he's just like unhappy. Instantly, like a switch has been flicked, right? So the things that we have for our dopaminergic targeting, right? I want that cucumber. That's really cool. I'll keep getting that cucumber. You're present. The second we see someone do a similar level of activity and get a different reward, we're fucked up and we change instantly, right? So that in a lot of ways can be bad and lead to envy. Like this is literally the foundation of envy. Like the original story of the Bible is Cain and Abel, and this occurs, right? But the other part of it that's good is that this is how groups improve their standards. So your guys are going along in your little gang, and one guy gets a little bit more reward for what he's doing. He's a little bit fucking smarter than you, or he's doing something a little bit different. And you're like, well, I'm not going to get envious because I trust and like these guys. I'm going to raise to that level. So that's what you see. So I like to coach guys when one guy, does a crazy 10,000 steps a week, and he's super tight with his nutrition, and he gets on the scale, and there's a surprise there. There's a grape, and his buddy who's being lazy sees it and goes, fuck, I got to do that too. That's where you get real permanent change, when people do this stuff together. If they're always doing it solo, they burn out, they get stressed, their wife's barking at them, their business requires too much, and they just fall off because there's nothing that's really pushing the envelope. There's no one that's raising the bar ever. And I find that is, and we call it these words now, social accountability, social motivation. This is just the power of the tribe. This is what the tribe does. When you're in a tribe, this is the shit that happens. We look at each other, we go, oh, we want that too. Let's everyone raise our standards constantly. But we live these isolated fucking pod lifestyles contained to ourselves. We never get to experience what these systems are designed for. And we only use them for the bad ways. So it's just envy, right? The system just manifests in mass envy, and everyone's upset. So
So it's when you mention that, I'm like, I thought of Alexander, because I'd never been a part of his group, but apparently he gets just great results. So I assume that you've and now I'm hearing it from you, and you're saying how good it is. So I'm like, yeah, that really makes a lot of sense, and probably is widely applicable. There's and if you think about it, there's some reason why guys gravitate towards their group of men. It could be the golf club, the drinking buddies, and that they get together with on a regular basis, to share their stories and lie to each other, and the innocent lies, fish stories type stuff, and how important that can be, from getting. It's part of it is escape from the world of the feminine, which is like pervasive now. Everything's fucking feminine now, and so it's a way to get away from that and get the kind of feedback that you're tuned to hear, right? Yes. To be you know, it's so funny, like this whole bullshit on the internet, and everybody's just as guilty as everybody else, with this whole, snowflake offending everybody, woke bullshit, blah 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 blah, blah. This is all chick shit. It's all chick shit, because when guys get together, there's you'd be like, fuck off, stop talking like a pussy. What are you, a little girl, right? Right. And
that's exactly it. We're not adapted for the feminine-led society. Guys are not interested. I mean, deep down, we're not. We might pretend. A lot of guys are pretending.
Yeah. They pretend. I said, dude, your virtue signaling is received. It's still not going to get you laid.
No, exactly. Right? Yeah. Hope she sees
right,
this, bro. Right.
Yeah. Right. You know who she's going to fuck? She's going to fuck the guy who tells other guys to go fuck off.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
That's the way we're designed. All comes back to the design.
Nice guys finish last. There's a reason that saying persists. So you quit. So just to tell everybody who's listening here, Travis and I go way back, though I didn't recall until later, and I went and looked at his. I only gotten your shit one time out of all the. You first comment was somewhere in around 2011. Yes. The last one was somewhere around 2015. So there's a 4-year space of time there where you pop in and interact in comments every now and then. And I forget. I think it was over this 50 Shades of Grey. There was some post I did about then.
Oh, really?
But I've got it. Yeah. See, I never read the book. I had never saw the film. And this is like 2 years ago now. My Thai girlfriend was visiting me in Phuket when I lived in Phuket. And 50 Shades of Grey, I think it was on Netflix or something. And she's watching it. And she was so into it because she was saying things like, oh, he does everything for her and da 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 da. So it's like really that keys into something in the female brain, whereas I think it's kind of just ridiculous. So I think I didn't really look deeply into what our dispute was over that, but it was kind of funny, and I thought about that. I thought about that experience, and I actually wrote something on the blog at some point. I say, okay, I finally think I understand this 50 Shades of Grey because I saw it playing out right in front of me, So, so at a point, the reason to continue, so how I got hooked up with Travis here again, or Trav, is that I had posted on Twitter that, and somehow we got to where we were following one another. And I posted on Twitter that it was 8 months. August 7th was, so it was like just a week ago, exactly a week ago, where I said, hey, it's 8 months today. So what I did was when I quit, what I quit is I did daily videos, right? Wow. For the first week, just how it's going. And then I shifted, then I did it every week. And when the month hit, I did one on month number 2, then month number 3, and then I did month number 6th. So my next one will be 1 year, right? So I'm 8 months in, and I call it my easy way. And just to briefly say it, I said, I tried many times before, and I was a serious boozer. Some people know. Some people had a suspicion, but and I call it drinking too much too often. And I could always stop. I could stop for a week. I could stop for 2 weeks. I went like 45 days once, I think in 2016 ish. I did a couple months here in Thailand, and during COVID, when I was building a house out in rural Thailand, and I cut it out for a couple months. So I could always do that, but in terms of making it permanent, I found that for me, if your life isn't boom, 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 then to some extent you're using alcohol as a self-medication for shit in your life that you haven't bothered to fix. And so you're just deadening the part of that you don't like. So I said, I said, I live in Thailand, tropical paradise. I can get all the chicks I want.
What am I drinking for?
What in the fuck am I drinking for? Don't I have something? Don't I have better things to do?
Yeah.
And it was that easy. It was that easy. It's like, oh, go to the beach. Go to the beach. I'm an avid swimmer and snorkel. So I'll get in the water with my fins and goggles and snorkel, and I'll do a couple miles, and then walk back barefoot. So that's kind of primal. I've got some videos doing that, so the ride my motor. I have a cool motorbike. It's a classic. It's called a Legend. So it looks like a classic from the 60s, Triumph, BSA, Norton, those type of bikes. Everything you need, nothing you don't. And I redesigned it so it's painted drab green with the white star on the tank. On the tank. Yeah.
That's funny.
Looks very cool. So I can go out and ride that, and any number of things I can do. And so I quit like that, and I call it my easy way. My easy way, not the easy way. It finally made it easy by first fixing my life environment so that I don't need it anymore. And then you're not losing anything, you're gaining everything. And it's like, whoa, the thought of people say, well, couldn't you just have a little bit now and then? I said, maybe I could. I don't want to risk it. It's not worth it to me. There's nothing in it for me, right? Sure, it's nice to have a nice alcohol buzz from time to time. I'm not going to deny that that's nice, but there's nothing imperative about it. It's like, oh, I could be making more money. I could have better relationships. I could be doing, if you could argue that I could do that. And here's the other thing is anyone in your life who gives you any is disappointed or trepidatious because you don't drink anymore, red flag. So there's my story. Now, what's yours? What made the switch?
Well, that's a long one. You read my thread on it, but
yeah,
I was running my business at the time.
Yeah, that's right. You were enamored of Trump. I have a friend who's a high-powered lawyer in Palm Beach. He's a divorce lawyer in Palm Beach, Florida, which is like the high-end divorce capital of the world. And his father started the firm, and he's in the footsteps and everything. And he's never had a drink or taken a drug in his life.
Yeah.
And so, so it's very similar with Trump.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
For me, it was, and I'll explain a bit because I've broken it down to a very specific process, but I was running a business at the time, and I had 3 employees, and I was noticing that my decisions were starting to become a bit neurotic. And my whole life, I was, Mr. Logic and Reason, clear thinking. But early 30s, I was starting to get like everything feels emotional. I'm feeling like a woman or something, dealing with my business problems. I'm getting overly my back up. I'm getting offended all the time. I'm like, why do I feel this anxiety? And I went on the Reddit, the subreddit called Stop Drinking. It's pretty famous, right? Like that's where people go if they want to stop drinking. And I remember reading post after post that drinking gives you anxiety, like in your gut, like it messes with your gut feelings. And that was certainly my experience. And I started to be like, wow, I'm finding this overwhelming. At the same time, interestingly enough, I had read a tweet from Elon Musk that he was talking about success in business. And he said that, success in business is how many actions you're taking and your error rate. If you want to make, you got to just get more actions and less error rate. And then your trajectory goes like this, right? And then I thought, well, fuck, drinking all the time is crushing my error rate. Like my error rate's way worse. I'm hungover one day and I'm messaging employees back on Slack or something, and I'm getting offended and they're getting their back up. I'm like, this is high error rate shit, right? There's something wrong here. And then it kills your actions too. Like you get lazy.
That's interesting. Right? You can be very good and very effective at what you do, and so good and so effective that you can have a fairly high error rate and still succeed and progress just because of your raw talents and abilities. But then you say, well, what if I reduce my error rate, cut it in half or reduce it by 80-90%, then what happens?
It goes exponential, your results. And that was the theory I had after reading that. I thought, well, this is crushing my error rate, and it's certainly not adding to the action side of the component. It's not making me like, I know probably for some lawyers, they go drink or whatever and they just fucking crush it, and it takes their action rate super high. So maybe if alcohol helped people there, because they're always like the high functioning alcoholics. Well, I certainly wasn't. I didn't have that. It didn't make me take more actions. I was just lazier and played video games or watched movies, and I had a brutal error rate because I had anxiety. So that was like the whole. I don't believe that you can quit this stuff until you can actually say that it's bad for you, right? I run into so many guys like, oh, I need to quit drinking. And then I'll get them to articulate why it would be bad for their life. And they can never really come up with something and be like, oh, well, I might get into a car accident. I'm like, well, you can mitigate that by getting a taxi. And they're like, yeah, I guess so. And I'm like, so you don't really dislike it for any particular reason? They're like, no, it just costs a lot. And I'm like, until it becomes, this is threatening to my lifestyle, it's destroying my trajectory, it's causing danger to my family, you're not going to quit it. It needs to be to that level of where you fucking fear it and you hate it. Then you're going to be like, you know what? I need to stop this.
Yeah. So interesting you say that, because in my case, it never affected endeavors in business. I ran a business, did fine with drinking. I had my side businesses. I could be drunk off my ass and still do a booking in for my one of my condos in Cabo San Lucas, and that's $3,000 a week level of stuff, right? I could do that I could do that plastered, easy, right?
So this is very dangerous setup.
And then the blogging, of course, it was almost like part of my whole shtick, right?
Added a bit of edge to those posts, I bet, right?
Yeah, because you say things you wouldn't otherwise say, but then I would typically set it aside and read it the next day when I'm at least not quite as plastered, and say, wow, okay, good, and just click and hit it, because that's real. It's like, well, at least we know one thing about Richard. At least we know he's not lying to us, right? Right. So that was the thing. But you said when it and I thought, well, I'd had my liver enzymes checked and everything. I was always fine, always in range.
Yeah.
So I have this kind of where I'm 62. I see guys who are drinkers who are like in their 40s and 50s, and they look like shit, right?
Yep.
Well, number one, I was never a beer drinker. I'm always a whiskey and water is my drink, right? And beer. I tell people, I see beer turns you into a female, right? Especially when you're just drinking it all the fucking time. It's pussy juice. So here's what happened. I suddenly lost my appetite. And for everything else, I mean, you've mentioned this too, I think, is the one thing you keep good about is you get good high density nutrition, because we know
Right.
how to do it and it's easy,
Yes.
right? And so I'm like, but I don't feel like eating, right? And then I looked at some pictures, like some selfies. I'm like, am I losing muscle mass? Because
Oh yeah.
alcohol was pushing out food, right? And I'm like, so I blogged about it, and about appetite loss. Nothing ever appealed to me. It was like had to force myself to eat. I said, that's not something wrong there, right?
Yeah.
So I said, well, I said, I'm gonna stop it because I'm almost sure that it's the booze. And absolutely it was. Within 3 days, I was like eating everything in sight, and I didn't even worry about it. Right.
Amazing.
And now I'm like, I have I was just formulating rules. I'm doing this book that um, called um, uh, Monks Never Get Invited to Dinner. And because here in Thailand, well, Buddhist monks have their rules are that they eat in the morning, 7ish, right? And they eat at noon, and that's it, right? So they're automatic, um, 18-6 guys, pretty much,
Right.
right? Now in the urban, they don't necessarily follow it, but if you got to rural, like where I built the house, you never see an unhealthy looking monk, and they have great longevity, right? And so that's the book. Monks Never Get Invited to Dinner, and I've experimented with that a lot, where I cut off all caloric intake anywhere between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, and don't eat or drink another calorie. It's great. And the sleep, you learn to embrace going to bed a little bit hungry,
Yeah.
right? And your sleep is just phenomenally better, and you lose weight effortlessly. There's an old joke, actually. When I started looking into this, a friend of mine who's big into the Eastern religions and mysticisms, he's like, I told him about it. He says, "Oh yeah," he says, "Haven't you ever heard the joke? Guy goes to his monk, says 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 uh, um, I don't know what they call monks, holy whatever. I need to lose weight." And the monk says, "Easy, skip dinner." And it's interesting when you start to think about that, because you never hear that in the whole paleo, ancestral, real food, intermittent fasting
Yeah.
realm. You only hear about
Breakfast.
skipping breakfast. So your eating windows are, it's kind of geared to how late do you want to be able to eat in the evening, right? When you start. So if you're on an 18-6 and you want to be able to munch down at 10 o'clock at night, well, you can't start eating until 4. So you've gone through your whole productive day in a fast. So I've experimented with this, like get up. I'm doing this now, and it's fucking fantastic. One thing I did is I stopped counting grams of anything. You might want to look into Mike Eads. Dr. Mike Eads, right?
Yeah.
Protein Power. Yeah. I've been talking to him, and he's been doing on his email newsletter, The Arrow, and talking about the weight of food versus instead of the energy balance, the mass balance, right? Because when you talk about protein sources, they're 60 to 80% water,
Yes.
right? That's why, right? So that's why you can eat pounds of meat, but in terms of like real energy grams, and fat has very little moisture content, right? And that's why it's 9 calories per gram by weight instead of 4.
You're saying this,
right? So anyway, what I do is I basically eat a pound of I call it protein source: meat, fish, fowl, whatever, shellfish, whatever. But usually pork here, Thai pork is wonderful. It's Thai pork is so good that I've forgotten about beef. And
right?
there's a store here there's a chain store here in Thailand called Macro, and it's a Dutch company that was started actually 15 years before Costco. I mean, certainly you know about Costco, right? If you go into Macro, you'd swear you were in a Costco. It's exactly the same, exactly down to every little fucking detail, right? So anyway, I go to Macro. I've got one like 10-minute motorcycle drive away. I've got my saddlebags, my backpack in case I need it. And I load up on typically I get pork loin, not the pork tenderloin. I get that too, but the pork loin is 140 baht per kilo. So that comes out to just a little over $2 a pound for delicious pork. So I'm eating. So the rule is eat early when I get up, but certainly before 8 a.m. and 300 grams minimum of protein source weight. So it's and then the final meal, whether it be noon or 1 or 2, but before 3. So before 3, another 200 grams minimum, right? And it's so easy, man. And I say, okay, if you're a woman or a small guy, like under 60 kilos, then make it to 200, 250 in the morning and 100 to 150 at night. They have a harder time if you're smaller, putting all that down. But it's crazy because your appetite. Now you will get hungry if you stop eating at 2, 3 in the afternoon. You will be hungry by the nighttime. But the thing is that you will embrace going to bed on an empty stomach because you sleep it's like, whoa, I can really go ahead.
I could probably add some insights here. So I've done a lot of self-experimentation with clients. So if you eat going to bed, close to going to bed, it's going to increase your resting heart rate because of the digestion, which gives you a less restful sleep. That's what I found is the mechanism. So if you're eating close to going to sleep, what do they say? Digestion takes 3 hours. So if you're eating within 3 hours, you're going to have an elevated heart rate by the time you go to bed. And then that's going to be the little bit of a disrupted sleep. You're going to be 3 to 4 points higher on your heart rate going to bed. And I find that that's enough to screw up a sleep, whether it's REM sleep or whatever. It just screws you up a little bit. Yeah. So I found that too, that if you stop eating earlier and you get to the point where you're going to sleep and it's a really low resting heart rate, man, you sleep like a baby. You get that incredible restful sleep. And that's the other thing about alcohol. Alcohol completely obliterates restful sleep. That was the other one, right? It totally eliminates REM sleep. You cannot have proper REM sleep when you drink alcohol. So you can see why people are just crushing themselves. They're eating right before they go to bed and they're drinking alcohol. Like no one is sleeping right. So that was that. Hopefully that would helpful understand that. But yeah, I agree with you about stopping eating earlier in the day. The only thing I think is challenging is that if you're stressed, it's difficult to not be eating late at night because you're always needing something for dopamine. You're always needing something to counteract the stress. That's where it becomes difficult, I think. And that's why guys tend to wake up in the morning, the stress isn't as high. They can fast the morning. And then the stress, the days picked up, the kids and the wife, and like they're just overwhelmed by the day, and it's the eating time, and it's just like coping, and and managing all that, and they usually need to eat like solidly until they go to bed. So it's always trade-offs. But if you can do that, it's much better. But I wanted to make a comment about your. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's an alternate title for the book, How to Screw Up Your Social Life, because you don't drink and you don't do dinner.
Right. Yeah, it's all the stress relief lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting you said that about the weight. So I had a massive, so a lot of what I do, you probably don't know this about me because you're not in my program, but I design frameworks and I design systems. And then I just give them, like, I don't coach people particularly anymore. I design systems and then they use them. And one of the systems I created was what I call the plate method. So I had this epiphany. In fact, I woke up from a dream having it. And I was trying to figure out how. I don't want to count calories because it's too tedious. I don't want to count macros. It's too tedious. This isn't realistic. I had my third kid at the time and he was just born. And I'm like, how I'm going to be so stressed. My sleep is going to be so screwed up. How am I going to be able to count calories? It's too tedious. And I always overeat when I'm stressed. I don't know about you. You're probably past those years. But when I'm underslept and I'm stressed, man, I can't control my appetite. There's just no modulation of it, right? And I understand that now, why that occurs because of stress. So I remember it was for like a week, I was worrying about, like, I've got to come up with a new system. How can I? And I remember waking up from a dream and I had the system literally like given to me in a dream. And it was around weighing up an entire plate of made food and then getting an average or using a multiplier to tell you what the average calories were. It's exactly the same thing as what you're talking about. Like, you're targeting the grams total, but you're just using the grams as the target. But you could add a multiplier to it, and that would give you the calories, right? It would, so the plate would be averaged. And you touched on it. You said the water content of the food matters. The fat content matters because it doesn't have much, it won't have much water content, right? And that was the epiphany. I woke up in the morning. I said, well, if you could arrange a plate in a certain way, well, you'll understand this because you know it, because I can always try to explain this to people and they never get it. But if carbs had no fiber and no water, and protein had no water, if you weighed them, they would be exactly the same calories. You would never have to. You would just need to weigh the plate, and you would know exactly how many calories you're eating, right? Because it's three or four calories per gram, right? So then what changes that math is the amount of water content, right? And the amount of fiber content. And then in terms of the meat, the fat content. So I was going through it and I thought, well, there's a way to make very basic multipliers given how you've arranged the plate. So I came up with this concept where I'm just like, one portion, let's say this is your plate, right? One portion is going to be half carbs and the rest is going to be half meat, right? Carbs are always roughly the same amount of calories. I don't know if you've looked into that before. I'm not talking veggies, right? Veggies are crap. I don't eat veggies anyway. But when you look at rice, potatoes, even pasta, they're very similar calories per gram because they have similar water content and they have similar fiber content. There's a little bit of variance, right? So that is largely, it's very easy to make a multiplier for that, right? And the multiplier is 1 calorie to 1 gram, roughly. That's what it comes from. Some are 1.2 calories per gram, but it's a rounding error, right? They're mostly 1 to 1. The big variance is the meat. You've got your tuna fish, which is super low fat, or you've got your ribs, which are super high fat, right? So that is the big variable. But what you find is they roughly land
the extremes,
they roughly land in 3 areas. You got the super low fat foods, which is the tuna, the scallops, the shellfish, egg whites. They're all similar, right? And they're about 1 calorie per gram. And then, or even like 0.8 calories per gram. And then you have the moderate fat. That would be your whole eggs. That would be your chicken breast. That would be your strip loin steaks because they're actually pretty low fat. That would be your extra lean ground beef, right? And those all come around about 2 calories per gram. And then you have the bacon, the ribs, you know, what else is there? Cheeses. They come in at 3 calories per gram, right? So you got 1, 2, and 3. And then the other side of the plate is fixed at roughly 1 calorie per gram. Well, from that, you can make 3 multipliers based on the meat that's on the plate. So you just weigh the whole plate. And you say, okay, this is extra lean ground beef. And you times it by a multiplier. So that's what I came up with. And that was,
and then, you know, and then you can actually, you know, do it by, you know, fist size and handfuls and stuff like that. So you don't even have to put it on the scale, right?
Well,
that's eyeballing.
And that's the what would you call it, the rudimentary version? Like I called it the fist method, but the plate method's so fast. See, I would just be like this, and then weigh it and be like times it by the multiplier 1.5. There's my calories, and it worked perfectly. And so it's a similar concept to what you're talking about. It's just trying to get the precision with the different meats. But that's what I developed and I use, and it is incredible. And then I use all the paleo logic around ingredient quality. You know, I'm trying to get soy-free eggs. I don't like chicken because they feed it soy. I like to stick to the beef. You know, I use all the paleo logic. It's just that I just make sure that I'm under eating, because the stress that we experience in modern life is so unnatural that, and for a lot of people, it leads to where you cannot moderate your appetite.
Toss two ideas at you and handle them. So the first is that money makes you fat.
Which does, sorry? Money
makes you fat. Think about it.
So this is one of your beliefs, that money makes you fat?
It's one of my ideas that I'm tossing around and collecting data points on.
Well,
it seems pretty plausible.
I would say that this is the chain I use. Debt makes you fat, if you can equate that with money, but they're not quite the same thing. But for most people, that's the reality. Almost everyone's broke, and what they have is a mountain of debt. And what it allowed them to do is it allowed them to go so beyond their means. House that's too big, car that's too big, appearances and identity that's all fake. All that results in is a massive amount of stress, because
what I'm getting at is I'm using money as kind of a metaphor to represent wealth, economies of scale, efficiencies, technology. In other words, you buy more with less over time.
Yeah.
So for example, I'll use Thailand again. When I was coming here, I came here a bunch of times between, my first time was 1986 to 91. And it was my last time. So roughly 5 years, came like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 times, total of maybe 6 months in country. I cannot remember in all those trips and all that time ever seeing a fat person.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember seeing one single fat person.
Right.
Now they are all over the place. And remember that wealth curve I told you about?
Yeah.
80 to 90% below the wealth thing at the time I was coming here before. So, but Thailand's a tropical country, so you can always get food, right? So it wasn't starvation to death. It was that food was expensive in terms of it being a big part of what you could make of your money. So a big chunk of your money goes to food. So when a big percentage, like say you make X number, say you make whatever you make, but to eat properly, it requires 25% of what you make. 25% of your paycheck goes to food, just to be healthy, to feed yourself, right? Okay. So over time, because of increase in salary generally in the population, so I'm talking about population level obesity here. So over time, people make a little bit more, and you have economies, more efficiencies, business development, all of that, and farming efficiencies and distribution channels, and on and on and on down the road, that makes costs of things become relatively less, even in the face of inflation, right? Things still cost less. So then here you are 30 years later, and food costs 5 to 10% of what you make, not 25% anymore, right? So what do? You eat a lot more because you can. Yep, back.
I had to get myself a drink. That's one thing I've done with my deviations from paleo is I've learned how to break all the rules with particularly in carbs. I wanted to ask you this. If you, we'll get into that. I want to answer that in a second. But have you ever heard of Ray Peat, Dr. Ray Peat?
Oh yeah, he just died.
Right. Yes. Well, I found his.
In fact, I have I have that in my notes for the book drafting, and I have Marty Kendall wrote a big post. If you know Marty Kendall, he wrote a big post about. He's a nutrition density guy, Australian, and he wrote a big post about Ray Peat. Of course, I've heard about Ray Peat stuff going back forever and ever and ever. Go ahead. Yeah, I've heard of him.
Well, it's just one thing. Like I like to have. It's probably shocking coming from the paleo community, but I like to have like a Coke or a root beer every day made from cane sugar, and it's no problem.
My go-to is orange juice, and that's another Ray Peat thing. And I just find it amazing that it's an uplifting thing. I'll take like a few. What I do actually is I drink quite a lot of iced tea. So I always have iced tea in the fridge, but I make. You know what an Arnold Palmer is, right?
Well, I haven't been a bartender in a long time, but
well, an Arnold Palmer is it's lemonade and iced tea. So okay. sweetened lemonade. It can be like half and half, or like 1/3, 2/3. Whatever your preferred mix is. But I use orange juice. So I it's about 1/3 orange juice and the rest tea, iced tea, and it's just great. But yeah, I do. Sometimes I go to. We didn't get into this on the whole alcohol thing, but one thing I did was from the very first day I went out to I made my same rounds to the bars, and that's what when I was going through your thread about Donald Trump, how he must just like. How he regards these people who are getting progressively drunker and drunker and drunker in the bar. Drinking. And that was exactly my experience. And I was like, I was at a point, it was very, people was like, so you still go to the bars? How can you do that? I'm like, hell, it was motivational because I'm looking and saying, that used to be me. And what a fucking idiot, right? You get progressively louder and louder and more boisterous.
And everything. You're spitting a little bit and, like, get away from me,
And the thing is in the moment, you think you're great, you and your buddies, and from stepping back and looking from the outside in, you're like, that's okay, all right. I acknowledge that every now and then, hey, it was fun, especially if it's around something like a game, like you're a football, Super Bowl, whatever. Everybody gets stupid drunk, or a birthday party or anniversary where everybody gets stupid drunk. Fine, okay, fine. But like I say, for me, it was two elements. It's too much. So too much is fine sometimes, but when it's too often, so it's too much and too often. Right.
That's when it's a problem.
Right. So and too often isn't a problem if you have a beer every day. People do that all their lives. They live long lives, no problem. Right. So so it's the combination of the two. Anyway, so we talked about the whole wealth thing, or explained what I mean. Now here's another one. Do you know who Ray Cronice is?
Rings a bell. Yes.
he was in Tim Ferriss's. I've heard about him when Tim Ferriss did his second book, his book of parlor tricks. His big thick one after his
4 Hour Body.
after he got, no, yeah, 4 Hour Body, something like that, yeah. And
I think that's where I remember it from. Yes.
Kronos had done a TED presentation about using cold therapy to increase calorie burn and stuff like that.
Right.
Anyway, somehow Ray got wind of my blog and he contacted me, and we've been buddies ever since.
Oh wow!
But Ray's a scientist guy, and he bought himself a personal. How do you pronounce the word? Calorie meter, a portable one. It's like a backpack, and you have a face mask, so you can precisely measure. You can precisely measure your caloric expenditure. So he did it in all sorts of things, like sitting in water, have up on the pool and up on the side of the pool, in there, or the cold dip or whatever. He did it exercising, done it sleeping, all sorts of things. He said, this is people don't understand is, he said, I strapped it on and there's some tall building in Chicago or Atlanta, US, not air conditioned in Atlanta in the hottest summer. So he walked up the stairs to the top of the building and walked and came back down. Took like 30 minutes, something like that. It's high, it's tall, right? He said, my total caloric burn, I'm not talking about above baseline, I'm talking about total caloric burn, was the equivalent of 2.5 Oreo cookies.
Yeah. I know.
And people go out and they spend 20 minutes in the gym and half of it's on a treadmill, right? And they think, oh wow, and so they go order an extra large pizza instead of the large pizza, right?
So undo it all.
So right, but he said, I've been in this just recently. I had a big long discussion with him because I had this idea of I don't think it's going to really go anywhere. I had this idea that what if, because you have the hierarchy of the metabolic hierarchy, so which is directly proportional to your body's ability to store, right? So you can't store alcohol. So when you are drinking alcohol, which has the same calories per gram as carbohydrate and protein, 4 calories per gram of alcohol, right? So when you drink, your body cannot store alcohol. It has to process it. So it goes to the front of the line, right? So if you're eating and drinking at the same time, you're storing what you're eating. While it processes the alcohol, and then comes carbohydrates, then comes protein, and then comes fat, right? That's the order in which things are digested. I'm thinking, what if you do some easy to do calculations, so that whenever you have a meal, you take your carbohydrate portion of it, assuming you're not drinking. So it's just a food meal. So you take your meal and you say, okay, there's about this many carbohydrates. What do I got to walk to essentially get through the carbohydrate portion faster, so that you're then working on digesting the protein and fat, right? But he's like, it's going to be really tough to do. He says, all the experiments they've done, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds documented. He said, what it really comes down to? Your time under load. He said, when you eat, people think, oh, you're hungry again in 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours. Your stomach, because your stomach empties within, typically within 3 hours. Typically, your stomach is done, but then it's going through the rest of your digestion system. But he's like, when you eat, it's that food is with you, having effect on you, on your metabolism for 12 hours, right? So you're not truly in a fast until 12 hours, where you're totally existing on what you have stored, in terms of glycogen and fatty acids and muscle tissue, protein tissue, right? So so he says, really, it's the frequency. So that's why grazers tend to be overweight. You know, even in the midst of it's like, well, it doesn't look like they're pigging. Yeah, but they're just eating all the time, right? Eat as soon as they get hungry, eat, 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 versus the person who eats a couple of times and at least a good 12 hours where you're not eating anything every day. And that's kind of how it used to be in life, right? This whole idea of just eating all the time. So I think that's a big, so you got like, so everybody's always focused on macros and calories and stuff. And it's, fundamentally it's true, right? But in terms of living human life, what is it? Well, could it be that food is cheap, right? And so you eat whenever you're hungry, and that's kind of, and so it's less important about what the things are that you're eating and their macronutrients and all that. How old are the kids?
Can you hear them in the background? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I have a 9-year-old,
It's okay.
a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So the 1-year-old just fell. And my office is annoying. It has this balcony where all the sounds come through. So
yeah. Oh, you've got a loft balcony.
I've got a lot I could add to that. So the problem that you're outlining to me is the fundamental problem of dieting. And it's why, so it's, that if you eat under a certain calories, you'll lose weight. I mean, if you've ever tested it on yourself or clients, it's 100%. Yeah. Like, calories are real. If you can eat under that, you're going to lose weight. If you can do that for a month, 2 months, 3 months, you're going to lose weight. But the problem is no one can eat under calories, right? Because what modulates appetite is something different, right? So if you go, well, theoretically, I'm going to eat only 2,500 calories, and I'm going to stay into that. The wife giving me a refill here. I'm going to stay into that range. That's the theory. I'm going to do that for 3 months. Well, you can't do it because the actual systems that manage the energy balance and appetite have a totally different plan that they're working on. Yeah. Right. And this is where it gets into what you talk about. So I don't think it's necessarily the cheap food that's causing the energy balance system to not operate properly. And I'll get into why. This is a big, grandiose explanation, but it merges all the fields that I do, the Austrian economics, the paleo, all this stuff. So and neuroscience. So there is this phenomenon that very few people know about stress. So when stress increases, right, when you have some sort of an event that implies some sort of helplessness that you need to overcome, right? Like there's something making you feel helpless, right? So the stress is increased. But what the purpose of the stress is doing is it wants you to then utilize one of the motivation hormones to solve it. And you have, well, four choices, but for intensive purposes, it's just 3 that you can use. So there is dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, or endorphins, right? Endorphins, that's no need to talk about them. So these are the 3 that you could solve stress. So let's say something's making you feel helpless, and you've got an enhanced stress response, cortisol's high. Your body wants you to motivate to solve it. So let's say it wants you to do oxytocin. You need to go get a hug from your mom. You need to get close with your family. You need to feel comfort, right? Maybe that was one way that you need to solve it. So you'd be motivated through oxytocin. Or you needed to get serotonin somehow. You needed to advance yourself in the hierarchy somehow. You needed to use the stress to compel you to rise in the hierarchy somehow. Or the third could be that it's dopamine. You just need to carry out some actions, and you need to solve the problem, right? By doing a bunch of things. So stress is compelling you to have a counteracting rise in those hormones. So the problem with broken modern culture is we have no avenues for oxytocin. We have no avenues for serotonin. That leaves, when stress increases, one avenue or 2, but one main avenue to deal with it all, and that's dopamine, right? So all the pressure of dealing with stress, because stress, everyone's got it wrong. Like, stress is this thing you need to escape. Stress is an evolutionary mechanism to solve your problems. It's about to compel all this motivation through those other hormones. It upregulates them all, right? The amount of stress will be concomitant with how much of the other hormones you need. So if you've destroyed avenues for oxytocin, if you've destroyed avenues for serotonin, it leaves everything on the back of dopamine, right? And then what's the easiest pathways to get dopamine? Food, alcohol, smoking, right? And then what happens is everyone just leans on comfort. So if you think of the stress as like a math problem, it's like this side, it needs to be balanced by this side. Evolutionary, usually this side would actually solve the problem, but in modern life, we have all these technological ways of getting dopamine that don't solve the problem. So then what happens is you complete the circuit and the stress dissipates. It says, thank you for getting all that dopamine. It must be great that you solved your problems. You're like, no, I just sat and drank all night. But bye to the stress. But then the stress comes back the next day because you didn't solve it. And then it comes back the next day because you didn't solve it, right? Yeah. So to me, it's when you get down to the obesity crisis, I mean, it's multivariate, obviously, but this is the big driver. So something occurred in the last 40 to 60 years that broke our ancestral traditional avenues for oxytocin, and then it broke our traditional avenues for serotonin, right? And that's where I get into, I know you have different views on this, but I think you'll find that mine align with yours, is that in a lot of ways, religion was an attempt to recreate the 50 to 150 person tribe, right? The Dunbar's number, if you know about that, right? That we're designed for only a certain amount of people that we can interact with. So when you get into this Neolithic agricultural civilization where everyone is spread out and they never interact and they're sort of actually closer than ever. There are so many people around them, but they're never close. The original paleo diet of socializing was to create religion, where it's like, okay, well, we'll congregate in this place and that'll give us oxytocin and it will give us serotonin, right?
Yeah.
So we had this patch fix, this original paleo social nutrition of having these little congregations around religion, right? And it wasn't just religion. It would be pubs. It would be the concept is called a third place. You know, you have home, work, and third place. We had all these third places. The Freemasons had their third place. You had, what were they called? Not unions, but the artisans back in the day, and the guilds. They had the guilds, and they had all these things where people would get together and they'd be able to have an oxytocin, and they would be able to have serotonin in particular, right? Like that there's a hierarchy that you have a place in, you're involved in something bigger than you are. It gives you meaning, right? Now we get serotonin for pills, right?
Community centers.
Right. So what happened, this relates to the Austrian economic stuff. So really started occurring in 1913, but I won't go there. But in 1971, they went off the gold standard and they started to modify our money, meaning it was no longer backed by gold, so they could inflate it like crazy. Yeah. Right. We understand the consequences of inflation, but we don't understand that unbridled the government to be able to spend on anything it wanted. Military spending went through the roof, everything. But one of the big things that they spent a ton of money on was public school. So then what happened is they created this alien form of congregation, a third place for kids, right? Yeah. And what happened is that muscled out the church, muscled out, muscled out all guild, like, I don't know, they didn't have guilds and stuff, but unions, it muscled out everything. It just, this place became the center of reality for everybody, the religion, the church of the state. And it doesn't give you oxytocin, though. It doesn't give you serotonin because it's a very alien infrastructure. It's you're in your own grade, and it's actually competitive. It's not cooperative. There's no underlying value system, maybe communism or reduce, reuse, recycle, or some Marxist style stuff, right? So then what happened is because they were able to spend on all these alternates to things that humans have been doing from an anarchistic perspective, like the church is an anarchistic institution. It's an emergent order, right? Yeah. It took over our third place. And then because what was happening at the same time, the government was able to spend like crazy. Human beings were able to take out debt like crazy. And then when we're able to compete on the amount of debt that we get access to, envy in society goes through the roof. And when envy goes through the roof, enmity goes through the roof. And people no longer get along anymore. So you got them congregating in this alien place. They're all competing, right? So what happened when they altered the money like that is human beings became very competitive and envious with each other. And then that broke all these institutions where we would get oxytocin and serotonin. Right?
Rather than cooperative and contributing and helpful and so on, because, you know, all of this, you know, the tide lifts all boats sort of idea.
So then the peak of this silly alien gross system we have was COVID, right? Where we're completely isolated. We can't marshal any form of cooperation, right?
You know, it's the thing is, I'd say COVID was both a double-edged sword and a silver lining, because without COVID, at least now it's all exposed for anyone who really cares to dig into it. It's all been laid bare. It's all been laid bare that the state and corporatism, big corporatism, fascistically, that's what it's all about, and everything has been a big illusion the whole time.
Well, you can think about this is almost like. Go ahead.
All that COVID did was expose it all. Yeah. Expose it all in such stark terms that you really, really, really have to be a serious fanboy to not see it. And the argument for that is like, look how many former leftists you have very few or any. From the conservative right side of the political spectrum, becoming more and more totalitarian, more despotic. But you have other people on the other side saying, whoa, I can't take this anymore, right? They see it for what it is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, your ideas are well taken in terms of how the kind of I suppose you could say hormonal underpinnings. So there's all these things in play, right? In the idea that, well, why do you do something? Well, because we can. So before, when you didn't have the ability to eat certain things during the year because they weren't seasonal or they weren't close, you couldn't get them to where you happen to live, right? Now everybody in the modern world can eat every type of food that the whole world produces throughout the whole year. There's no more seasonality to anything either.
Well, I'll give you, but the thing was, prior to 71, there was a great deal of abundance, particularly in the Western world, but we still weren't overweight. So it's abundance. We will still manage our appetite properly if we don't have the stress only going to dopamine, right? Because we've always been stressed throughout history, but we had all these institutions, is my point, and all these structures that deal with stress. So COVID really marked the end of, we call it Zuckerberg created Meta. I want to create my own universe that you interact with. Well, the state has been doing that ever since it modified the money supply. It's saying, I'm the meta designer now. I'm designing the school system. I'm designing like how you work in the medical system. So the state is acting like a form of a god, and we're in this experiment that peaked with COVID, right? And, the end result of their experiment is, you live in the pod and you eat the bugs and you blah, 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 like this shitty lifestyle that they want for you. You own nothing and you'll be happy, right? But we know.
Interesting.
Well, I just had this last thought, but we know that the isolative aspect of COVID caused extraordinary weight gain in people, right? I had some clients because my studio closed, and then I saw them 3 months, 6 months later, and I'm like, how did you gain 50 pounds? It's because the stress went through the roof, and really, I mean, the inhumanity of social distancing and lockdowns and not allowed to see your family at Christmas. Zero oxytocin, zero serotonin. These people were just sitting in their houses watching Netflix, consuming dopamine, like, or consuming for dopamine to deal with this stress, this fundamental, because they have been taken so far out of their ancestral design, which is for community and tribalism and oxytocin and all this stuff. And they're put in this weird state meta world of, you know, you got Uber Eats coming to the door, you watch Netflix, you never see anybody except through FaceTime, right? But that was, so that it's the whole creation of that to me that is the cause of obesity, right? And that involves also that process of building that meta world where we're like these weird disconnected creatures. We're super sedentary because we sit on our phones all day and we do work from home. And so you have all these things that have affected our base design. And that's what I believe. So I don't believe it's the money, because if we had a money that was sound, right? Like historically, like if you don't have that highly inflationary times, you won't see this problem. Like, I don't believe that high technology, high abundance necessarily leads to us being Wall-E people, right? Like, we're overweight and we sit in chairs. Right?
That was what I was thinking of.
I think it's because we warp the money and we warp the incentives and we warp our hormonal design and we warp the environment so bad that we don't know down from up. And I think that's where we are right now.
What we've done is, so we're talking about all these things, and you know, and going back to this thing too, right? And social media, you know, a fully developed social media where everybody in the world is on Facebook, you know, for example, and all the others, and FaceTime, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you know, and there's kind of like a flavor of social interaction that keys into certain people the best. Right. And so, but what this all comes down to, Trav, is what we're talking about is all these things coming together to create the perfect storm, because you know, obesity was going like this. Now it's you would think it's like okay, you know, if you follow nature or markets and stuff, you know, you get stuff that goes do. It just doesn't keep going and going and going. I know. Right. So we're in a perfect storm. So, but that, you know, ultimately something's got to give. And those things happen on individual levels. So it's like up to people like you, people like me, and a million others out there who are smart enough or perceptive enough to see what's going on and what can you do. Well, first thing is set somewhat of an example. I just wrote out a thing. I'm always trying to experiment with things, like find that thing and then I can convey it. You know, going back to your conversation with Alexander yesterday, which I found very interesting. He's quite a bright, but you know, here's what I took note of. I looked down and I'm like, this is great material. I'll include it in the links to this so that they can go and see more of you. And you guys get really, really deep into the philosophy and stuff. So for anybody who wants that, but I look at it, I'm like 738 views or something like that. 738 views, right? And then you see the most ridiculous shit, and it's got 5 million, right? That's part of our problem right there. Is nobody can take more than 10, 5 or 10 minutes. Gotta wrap. Put it in 5 or 10 minutes. It's got to be all flashy and the big flashy this and that and this and that and everything, rather than just like we did. I started doing that a little bit, and then the thing on the, you know, what's your thumbnail for your video and everything. And then, fuck off. You know, I'm just gonna put it out there, and you can and listen to it if you want. If you don't want to, I don't fucking care. But anyway, but I'm thinking about your thing. I'm like, what I'm trying to do with everything. I'm talking about AI. I still talk about the diet stuff. I talk about my geo arbitrage and living in Thailand and all these things. And I'm like all I'm trying to do is convey to people a little bit of my experience so that they can kind of at least think about escaping this just shitty thing. My newest thing is my newest saying, because I come up with these little sayings. I'm like, and my newest one is money is worthless in a shitty life. You know, think about that. If you have a shitty life, what good is money going to do, right? And I'm talking shitty from the standpoint of just misery crap that you deal with all the time.
Implicit to that saying implies it's well, why then would the person pursue money if life is shitty? And I think that goes back to my position that it's this satisfying of envy that everyone has. I'm pursuing this because I observed, like that monkey in the cage, someone have more than me, and I can't be happy with what I have, so I've got to pursue the money side of the quotient or the stuff side of the quotient, or else I'm not going to feel good about myself, right? Yeah. And that's just writ large in society right now, and that's really the foundation of these cultural Marxists, the gender Leninists, what were you calling them? The biology Lenin. But it's all about this problem of there's this group of people that feel less than within society, and they're just envious of the other, and that's what we're dealing with it on such a society-wide level right now.
And they're not interested in bettering themselves.
No, it's about it's about this guy
dragging
him down.
Yeah, drag him down. Yeah. So let me and we're at over 2 hours here. So we can do this again any damn time. But let me run this thing down to you, because I thought, what if, people write out schedules and say, okay, at this point, this time I'm going to do this to this time for this hour. So I thought, what if instead of using the clock, I just use the amount of time spent? So whether I would say average, I'm up at 4 a.m. every morning, just because that's how I like. I go to bed at 9 or 10 and I get up at 4 to 5, typically. No, I would say 9 to 11 and get up 3 to 5. Sometimes, today was 4, yesterday was 3:30. Anyway, so here's what I did. I find that my writing is way, way better in the first thing off the bat in the morning. So I say, okay, so rise whenever, get up, write, research, 4 hours minimum, 4 hours of time, rather not this time to this time, just spend 4 hours doing it, and eat within that time, but before 8 o'clock, my 300 grams of protein. Then, so you're going to get into like 9 or 10 in the morning. Then it's like personal health, 4 hours minimum. Can walk, swim, gym, motorcycle ride, lay on the beach, read something, something that's personal, physical, mental health, 4 hours minimum every day. And then after that, then I spend minimum 2 hours publishing and promoting. So whatever I've written that's close or ready to publish it, promote it, get on social media, do that kind of stuff for free time. Eat my minimum somewhere in that window of the other 200 grams of protein source. And then it's what do I call it? Wild card time. Do whatever you want after that. You do more work if you want, or Netflix it, whatever you want. Get in debate something. But what I think is the most important aspect of the two most important things are getting the creative part, that creative writing that I like to do, research right off. Get it, not get it out of the way, but do it when I'm best at it. the freshest. I'm coffeeing up at the time typically.
Yeah,
It's good. I can, yeah. And so I'm good at it then. And then the other thing is the fat, nice fat part of the day from say 10 or 11 till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I'm doing stuff. That's the time where I'm doing healthful stuff. The sun is nice. I can get good sunshine, go for a walk, sweat my ass off. It's amazing in 3 years how adapted to tropical, hot, humid you get. It doesn't bother me at all anymore. Yeah, no, I can. In fact, I even have better adaptation than some Thais who've lived here all their lives. They're always complaining about how hot it is. I'm like, what's your problem? You're Thai, right? So yeah. No, it just I mean, when I first got you really get hot and bothered sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't phase me anymore. Doesn't phase me anymore. All right, so it's good. Okay, anything last to say? I think what we should do is do another one and delve into the religious stuff, because we both come from I don't. Were you ever religious when you were young? See, I grew up in the fundamentalist Baptist thing, but then I was a
really?
hardcore atheist. Yes, I was born again. Yeah, and then I was an atheist from about 1991, and it was maybe about 10 years ago. During the paleo time where I would still mock religion. But what I mock is the literacy of the taking it literally, right? Rather than trying to understand what it was about in terms of helping a way to keep some order, some social order, some civil order and social order.
It's like I always say, if you're interpreting properly, it's teaching you what works. It is teaching you what I call the meta. It's teaching it's a book. It's a book of the meta, but it can be used as a totalitarian tool, particularly culturally, right? Where everything gets labeled sins, and then before you know it, it's not a thing of the meta; it's a thing of control.
Well, that you mentioned John Durant's book, Paleo Manifesto, and how he showed that a lot of like the Jewish and various Orthodox and whatever religious practices with respect to food, what you can eat, what you can't eat, sanitation practices and everything, those had fundamental health reasons behind them. It's well, this works. They found that, well, if you don't eat this, we're better off, basically, or if we do eat this, we're better off. So we need to be eating some of this sometimes and not eat this sort of thing, so on and so forth. But the thing is, how do you sell that to people? What you can go like we do now and do all, oh, well, there's this study. Oh, well, well, I have that study. I have this study. Right? The study Olympics, right? Or you can say, because God said so. It's a commandment. Just shut people up. Yeah. Say, just fucking do it because God said so. Right?
That's how this stuff was communicated back then.
Right. And so, but you say, okay, but what if it's not totally true? And you say, who cares? It's about living life to the best. And if you figure out the best way to do it, then it's sad reality that sometimes people have to be lied to, or they just don't do it. Now, hopefully you have someday you have what I call fully integrated honesty, but people can't have it. It's amazing to me how people, almost to a man, insist that they be lied to on a daily basis. We could get into that. Everybody insists that they be lied to. It's right.
Well, it's because they don't want to experience stress, right? The truth is often stressful, and especially if you have no structures to handle it, it's just going to send you to the bottom for most people, or it's going to send you the food, right? So I understand hormonally why they can't handle it, but it's problematic for.
It's in, now okay, now take the propensity that we have. We everybody lies to each other every day. People say, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm great. Well, even if you're shitty, you typically say, hey, I'm great. So you just told a lie, right? Okay, now multiply that by, or put an exponent on it. Like, let's talk about to the 10th power. Yeah. And that is the Asian saving face ethic, right?
Really?
Oh, here's what I say. Here's what I tell people. I say, it's not a question of whether or not Thais are lying to you. They're lying to you. Right? So it's and you can't really call them on it. It's kind of like, okay. What's that? Hang on. There's a political aspect to this. Let me bring it up. Oh, I think it's right there too. Hang on.
We'll have to continue this because I got to run to boxing really quick here.
Okay. Hey, all right. We'll close it with this. Okay. Elena Goroka. The rules are simple. They lie to us. We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying, but they keep lying to us, and we keep pretending to believe them. So
that's funny. I had no idea. Right. I thought it was bad around here. I guess not.
No. But I also say just know the terrain. You aren't getting perfection. The thing to do is know the terrain and know how to be smart enough to know how to navigate it, and quit getting butthurt about every fucking thing. Yeah. What the world needs now is a big revival tent of mind your own fucking business, right? Yeah. This thing of everybody, it's just crazy, so I don't know. That's a sour note to end on, but you got to do stuff.
Well, it relates a lot. It relates to a lot of what I'm doing. I don't think we're going to get back to that place of mind your own fucking business. So I really, for the theme for a guy like me, family man, my age, the theme is subversion. It's like, well, if you're gonna fuck up everything in the territory, you're gonna screw up the landscape. I'm subverting everything. I'm disappearing to my own private world, and that's what I'm building. Yeah. And a lot of people are starting to do that. And we have things that allow it. All the stuff with the internet, how it creates all this compliance and groupthink and all this control. It also allows so much sovereignty. I mean, you have Bitcoin on the one hand. You have all these ways to find your exact tribe, right? So that's been my theme. I have no illusions the world's going to get better. I don't even fucking care anymore. I used to care. I used to have that whatever, like when you first get into paleo, like everyone needs this, and you're telling all your family members, you're trying to fix everybody, and you're like, oh, you don't need to be on those pills, and no one listens. And you're just like, what? And I'm at this place now post-COVID where I'm just like, fuck it all. I don't care. I can't change a thing. I can only control my little world. And the only thing I can truly do is subvert it all. And that's where my head's at. So I'm gonna live in pure liberty and anarchy, but it's my own subversive sovereignty. And I'll tie that into the religious thing, because I think the early church was like that in terms of the oppressive Jewish culture with sin management and the oppressive Roman culture. They just went into their basements and they went into their living rooms and they're like, fuck you all, right? We're staying in this place. And then of course it gets corrupted. But that was the original idea. Subversive sovereignty is the great idea that the West is built on. And that's where I'm at now.
Well,
I'm done with everything else.
I think what we can be sure of is that the last few hundred years, or one could go back to the big religions of civilization, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Eastern ones are just kind of different. But it all comes down to, I think religion is in a sense a way to a way to reconcile the fact that people aren't perfect, whereas secular statecraft and the nation state, it seems inexorably, you know, and the big example of that, or the harshest example of that, is hardline communism, totalitarianism, where God damn it, if we keep these these incentives like this, we're going to re-engineer human behavior.
Yes.
And it,
yes.
right, I think you touched on it in the nature nurture part of your discussion. So there's endless things we can get into, right there,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. That's the great hubris and the great delusion that these meta designers, they want to do, right? They just want to recraft everything, where guys like me and you just want to get in balance with it. That's my only goal. So maybe that's a better note we've ended on there then.